12 candidates that have put their name in the hat to challenge Trump in the 2020 election. This group of candidates have promised a lot. One being free college tuition, one being government-sponsored student loan reductions, income inequality, and the Green New Deal, where it promised people that if they choose not to work, that they would have a basic income. Now we have Venezuela falling apart, where it's showing socialism failing at epic proportions. My question to you, Congresswoman Craig, are you for socialism or against?
Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it. I tell you what, I got a lot of Republican colleagues who would rather not have to comment on everything that the administration does or says or some of their colleagues, and I feel about the same way about the Democratic Party. When I said we're a big tent party, that means, many of us
Are you for it or against it?
I have said very, very clearly that I believe there is a role for the private sector, a very strong role in this country for the private sector.
I don't mean to be disrespectful. Are you for socialism or are you against it?
So if I'm for the private sector, that means I am not for moving. You want to say something? I am not for moving the country to a socialist nation. I believe that we can continue to invest in Social Security and do right by our seniors. I believe that there's a role for the private sector. I spent 22 years in the private sector. I think good jobs are created from the private sector. I also believe that to accelerate those jobs' growth, sometimes you need to invest in the public sector. What we're talking about in the Transportation and Infrastructure Bill is a very, very good example of that. If we put $1 trillion, which is actually what the president says he'd like to do, and frankly, I'd like to support him in that, $1 trillion into the needs of this country for infrastructure growth, that's an example of a public sector investment that I believe will lead to private sector growth as well. So thank you.
Good afternoon, Congresswoman. We're happy to have you here. My name is Jesse McCardle. I'm originally from Shakopee. I graduated from this very high school in 2014 and just home on break. I personally have some serious concerns with your support of H.R. 8 and would like to get into that a little bit. I personally don't think that it will work. I just read a study just the other week in political science class that actually was produced by the California Department of Public Health, and the state of California was one of the very first states to ever implement universal background checks in 2006. And this study in 2016 found that over that decade period, gun violence rates had either stayed the same or risen in all 58 counties in the state of California. In my opinion, what we're doing with this bill, right, is making it more difficult for law-abiding gun owners like myself, my neighbor, other people in this audience, to go out and get firearms and have to go through additional background checks, and it's also more difficult for transfers. If I want to give my gun to my cousin so he can go hunting for the weekend. So I'm here with you. I'm all for gun violence measures. I agree that
Please ask your question.
Oh yeah, I'm getting there. Any measure that actually does save one life is worth it. I agree with you 100%. However, with this bill, from what I've seen, from what we've seen with empirical evidence on the state level, will not do that. I personally think it would have been more appropriate to have the Shakopee Trap Team, which I was a personal member of and really enjoyed my time with them, to come out here on stage and have you explain to them how it's appropriate for their family members to have to go through additional loopholes to obtain weapons through law, legal ways. So I guess my only question for you would be, do you really think that H.R. 8, despite some of the evidence we've seen in California and other places, would do anything significant to decrease gun violence? And do you also think that it won't make additional hoops for law-abiding gun owners to jump through in order to get weapons? Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I really appreciate you being here because, these are the exact conversations I had before I signed on to co-sponsor H.R. 8 and before I voted for H.R. 8. And just to let you know, one of the questions I had from my colleagues was, is there a provision that would allow, for example, my son's grandfather to pass his gun down, or the cousin, or the uncle, or the brother, just as you said. And in fact, HRA does have that exclusion in it. So that was something that I specifically, because of good conversations like this, where you sort of step up and we think we're on two sides of an issue, and then we find out that, there's more common ground there than we thought when we first started our conversation, and that's exactly what I try to do with all of this. I'm not familiar with the study from California, so that would be fantastic if you could make sure that my district director has that. But the stats that I quoted here a little bit earlier, I won't repeat them, are stats from states who have implemented universal background checks. And what we're talking about here is just making sure if you go to a trade show, you got the same background check as if you go to a gun shop. Personally, I went to a gun shop. I shoot trap with my boys. Not great, kind of badly. But it wasn't that big of an ask for me to go fill out a little bit of paperwork and have a background check before the store gave me my 20 gauge over under, to be very specific. So, I don't think it's too much to ask. Most of the Minnesotans that I've talked to also, believe that with the exclusion to passing down, and, if you hadn't asked me that, my son Josh would have, can Grandpa still pass his gun down to me? Or am I going to have to go through a background check? And so having those conversations made me a better member of Congress, because I could go to my colleagues and say, is there an exclusion for that in HRA?
Your time
And
is up.
in fact, oh, good, thank you.
And,
We both got called out on that one, so thank you.
it is also noon, so would you be willing to take 2 more questions?
I'm sure, absolutely. If there are 2 more, yeah, perfect.
I think you've been waiting up there for quite some time, where you...
They're going back and forth.
We have been.
Are you in line, ma'am? Okay, great. Well, we can
That's
start
fine, go
then.
ahead.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Fred Garcio, Burnsville, Minnesota. I'm a Second Amendment advocate across the country, and I'd like to let you and everybody else know you can look at 2011 FBI Crime Table 1, 2011 FBI Crime Table 1. It's a 20-year summary with 10 violent categories. It's down every year, every category for 20 years. That's continued for the past 27 years. Our current levels of crime would need to increase 2 to 3-fold in every category to reach the 1992 levels. It's a shame that our media and our liberal government is lying and not telling us about these facts. I encourage all of you to take a look at that. Also, the states that have all the gun control laws, Maryland, New Jersey, New York, their rates, California, are 6, and if you look at DC, I think it's 15 times our murder rate. It's like night and day. The states that have done castle law, conceal and carry, are the ones that saw their crime levels drop 60, 70, 80% in a few years. The liberal states with all the gun controls are continuing to go up. I'd really like to know if you can tell me where those stats are that you think the background check has done a 50% decline in anything. Right now, in some of my documents, we have 500 county sheriffs that have signed on to this kind of stuff, that we don't think these are constitutional. They're not going to do anything. It's a big, onerous...
Please ask your question.
So, knowing that these kind of things are available, how can you support H.R. 8 and H.R. 9? And the last thing I want to say is, on the Minnesota bills, you're required for life. If you loan a hunting rifle to somebody, for the life, your life, to keep track of those documents. It's a gross misdemeanor. I think it's $10,000 in a year in jail if you can't produce that document and you've got to get your gun back.
So first of all, thank you for sharing the data and the information. If you've got data that you think I ought to look at, I would encourage you to share it with my district staff, and I commit to you, I'll take a look at it.
It's been there for a month.
And I will, I think I've probably stated my position on HRA a couple times already here today, so I just say thank you for being here, and obviously we have a little bit of difference here. We found a little bit of common ground here, and I would tell you that I'm going to keep looking for that common ground, but I do believe that we ought to study this issue and make sure we're doing everything we can to keep Americans safe. Thank you.
I'll get to finish up. My name is Sue Westergaard. I have taught mathematics for 45 years and recently retired. I have some concerns about education, and I'll just state a few things. Number one, please don't ever expect a teacher to be armed. Number two, I get I'm very concerned about the lack of full funding for special education. Number three, I'm very concerned about the fact that we have a hard time recruiting teachers because, to be honest, the pay is not that wonderful, and the stress and the effort that's put in by each individual teacher, I don't know why. Well, I taught for 45 years, I wanted the job, and it was a passion for me. And then I guess the last thing would be working to allow everyone and to have access to a higher education. I don't care if it's college, I don't care if it's VOTEC, we just need those things. And so those are my concerns.
All right, I thank you, Sue. Thank you for asking the question, and in 2 minutes, this is going to be a challenge. So let me start with, I'll speed answer. Special education. I am already working with Republican Pete Stauber. Pete and I both have special needs children, and we are working together on a bill that Jared Huffman is going to be introducing, hopefully in April, to raise special education funding toward the 40% that the federal government has committed to. Minnesota's share of that right now is 7%. We're sending, back to my opening statement, we're sending our money to Washington and it's not coming back. And the knockoff effect on that is we're asking you to take more kids in your classroom, right? Because we're cutting programs across this congressional district, even my own 196. So it is a significant challenge that I am absolutely committed to working on. The second question of teacher pay, I'm going to tease you a little bit because this is a significant issue to me as well. I'm the wife of a teacher. I am the daughter of a teacher. I am the mother of 4 children. I have such respect for teachers in this country. I'm also the former head of HR, which means I look at data about teacher pay and other jobs, and American teachers are some of the most underpaid in the world for what they do on a daily basis. So I am working with the Center for American Progress and someone on the Senate side to actually put my own bill out that would address some of these issues, but we're still working out the details of the bill. Did you have a third question? Don't arm teachers. Okay. I think we already established that. And what I would say to that also is there is a bill that will provide funding to help rebuild America's schools. And part of that, listening and understanding, is that there are some physical structure security issues that some of our nation's schools could benefit from some remodeling from. And so I am supporting that bill so that we can continue to just keep our kids in mind. So I just want to say once again, thank you. I am working every single day to figure out how do I develop relationships in the U.S. Congress that are going to help me be a bipartisan member of Congress. When I say that, what I mean is not that you're going to agree with me 100% of the time. I know all of you won't agree with me 100% of the time. My voting record will not be 100% of the time with the Democratic Party. It isn't now and it won't be. But what I commit to you is that I'm going to keep working to find those relationships in the United States Congress with like-minded Republicans and like-minded Democrats who want to bring this country back to the time when we had Ronald Reagan in the White House and Tip O'Neill in the House, to a time when we didn't always agree, but we found common ground, and we didn't find every single issue so politically polarizing. It is tough right now, I know, because everything in D.C. gets caught up in D.C. politics. I am not going to be caught up in D.C. politics. That's why I'm focused on transportation and infrastructure, and ag, and supporting small business, and figuring out how can you have a viewpoint of sustainability for our seniors programs and not continuing to increase the debt and the deficits. These are challenging, right? But I commit to you, I'm going to keep coming. I know you're all going to keep coming. And I look so forward to representing you as your member of Congress. My team is always available. They're always open for your feedback and your input. Every single week they pass that feedback along to me. And I will just continue to commit to showing up, to listening to you, to looking for common ground. And hopefully at some point we'll be back to a place where we can find civility and bipartisanship in this country again. So thank you for coming.